Hi, this is Cheryl Lesh-Maughlin, and I've been building gingerbread houses for 10 years. I use my houses for gifts, fundraisers, decorations, and I think people get such a kick out of them when they receive them. Our family gets in the kitchen together and we have a great time creating and having fun. I'm going to show you how to build a small house, which is great for a beginner and just about any age. So let's get out in the kitchen and get started. In designing your gingerbread house, there are a few things you need to consider, such as placement of the items in the yard, which you'll be decorating your house with. Here in front of me, I've pulled some things together that could be used. Here I have Necco wafers, and I use Necco wafers for the roof, and also I use them for a walkway. Rock candies I use for fence. I also use them for walkways, and I also do some brickwork along the edges of the house. This tree I put together is an upside-down ice cream cone, and I'll show you how to make those in a little bit. Here I have some toys that I've pulled together, and I like to tailor-make my houses. For instance, if we have a skier, I like to put skis in the yard. Here I have some Nilla wafers, and I use the Nilla wafers on the roof also. Up here in the front, I have some candy and some cookies that I also use for roofs. The chocolate-covered graham crackers here on this small house I use for the door. You may also want to consider where your house will be displayed. Are you going to display it on the table, in the dining room? Keep in mind the colors that you use on your house, the candies that you use, and the toys that you use in your yard. To get started, what I've done is I've gone to the hardware store and I've picked up a piece of plywood. I've put red tape around the edges, which can be also purchased at the hardware store, and it can be bought in many different colors. This base is 10 by 14. Also on top of it, I'll put a 1-inch piece of styrofoam. The 1-inch piece of styrofoam I've cut to 8 by 12 inches. The base is important because when you go to transport your house, you have something to carry it on. Now we're moving into dough preparation. Before you get started, make sure you have all the items necessary to prepare the dough. All of these items can be purchased at your local supermarket. For rolling out the dough, what I do first is I oil a cookie sheet. And I pour a little oil on my cookie sheet, and with a paper towel, I make sure I get all the surface covered. Then I take about 1 to 2 cups of dough, and I put it on the cookie sheet and spread it out with my hand. And I need to get a little more on this cookie sheet. And just begin to fill out all the empty spaces. Okay. Now instead of using a rolling pin, what I decided to use is this glass, because I'm able to get to all areas of the cookie sheet. So I go ahead and I roll my dough out using my glass. If you have a glass that's straight edged like this one, you might prefer to use it instead of your rolling pin also. And I use it just like a rolling pin and roll my dough out. And what I'm trying to get at here is to get my dough to about 1/4 of an inch thick. Okay, now I'm just about done here. There we go, we get that last corner. Add a little more flour. And after this, we can add the pattern pieces and cut them out. There we go. Now we're going to cut out the pieces of the house. And so what we do here is we place the piece down, and then I use a paring knife, and I just trace around the pattern piece. Just so. And when I'm finished tracing around the pattern piece, I'll carefully lift it up and set it down again. Notice when I set it down again, I set it about 1/2 inch because when it's in the oven baking, the pattern piece will expand. And one thing that you need to make sure of is you need to make sure that you get 2 pattern pieces cut out of each piece. So I have I have the front and the back here cut out. Okay, next, these are the roof pieces. And I'm making sure I get them spaced apart also. Tracing around. And if I... Okay, it looks like I can maybe squeeze one more pattern piece in here of the roof. Might be able to get this whole house on this cookie sheet. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you can't get a whole house on a cookie sheet. Takes a couple tries. Looks like I can get one extra piece, so we're going to have to bake another pan of dough to get one extra side here. Okay. Now once I have those all those pieces traced out, I have to take out this extra dough. So I pull it out just like so and put it back in the other dough. You can see there I kind of bumped the corner, but what's going to happen is this is going to expand, and then I'm going to come back in and trim these pieces. So, and we'll see that after we bake it. There we go. Now we're ready to place this into the oven and bake it on 350 for about 8 to 10 minutes. Here I have the pieces out of the oven, and now real quickly we need to trim them. So we're gonna, and they're awfully hot, so you want to set a hot pad up there and then go ahead and trim right around that pattern piece where they've expanded. Okay. And if a piece breaks off, then if it's too bad, then go ahead and bake another piece for it. But if it's not too bad, you can kind of hide some of those corners that have a tendency to break off every now and then with some frosting. But you see how I'm kind of quickly here going around the edges, because this will get pretty crispy if I don't get it real quick. And with these extra pieces that I'm cutting off, my family loves to come in and have a little nibble of them. Okay, now we've got all the pieces trimmed up, and we're going to go ahead and go on to decorating the houses. Okay, now I'm going to transfer these pieces very carefully over to this piece of newspaper here. And as you'll notice, underneath here I've got my styrofoam base. So I want to be careful I get that piece on that styrofoam. And this is where I'm going to leave these pieces to harden for 48 hours. Okay, we're ready to get going with our frosting. This is my favorite part because this is where I get to get creative and have a good time decorating my house. Right here I've put together some items that I've picked up at a cake decorating store. You may also want to pick them up at your favorite arts and crafts store. As soon as you complete your royal icing recipe, it's real important that you keep it covered with some sort of plastic wrap because it will dry out and get very hard. We put the big part of the coupler into the pastry bag, put the tip, I'm using the number 18 star tip, and then you screw the coupling portion and it captures the bag. Okay, then I fold the bag down and we get into this frosting that we've prepared and we fill this. Don't put too much frosting in this bag because it's going to make your arm awful tired. So I just put a little bit in because we won't need too much. So then we've got a filled frosting bag. Now that we have the frosting made, one thing that we do need to do first is let's glue this base down. And to do that, I just make a line of frosting just like that, push the styrofoam down onto the wood, and kind of center it there. Okay. Then the next step is we're going to go ahead and we're going to put the windows and doors on. So we'll start with the door, put a little bit of frosting on the back of the chocolate-covered graham cracker, and place it right in about the center of the front piece. Now you notice I put it up a little bit high because we're going to have a little bit of drifted snow up in front of the door. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and I'm going to put the windows on. I'll put them on both sides. I just run a line of frosting across the back side of the window and then just place it down on the middle of the side wall. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the windows on the front of the house and I'll place two little Andes mints right next to each other and kind of center them here like that. Now keep in mind if you're going to make like say a church and you want to make church windows, what you can do is you can take Andes mints and think about putting them here like this, take them over, cut them with a knife and bring them up so that that makes a nice stained glass window. But we aren't going to make a church this time. So here we're going to put the window in the back of the house. And there we have the windows and door placed. Okay, now I'm going to switch tips. I'm going to put on a number 2 round tip. It will help me make the doorknob and the window casing. Now I'm going to make the doorknob, and to make the doorknob I squeeze out just a little bit above the cookie and let go of the pressure. Then I place a small silver candy ball in the middle of the frosting. Okay, now to make the window frame, I squeeze a little bit of frosting out at the end, pull the line towards me as I'm squeezing steady pressure, and then drop it down. And then I start in the middle of the window, squeeze pressure, and stop. And boy, that's one of the better ones I've ever made. When I'm making this window framing here, what I like to do is I try to make sure that I get all the lines that are going to be standing vertical the same way and all that are standing horizontal the same way. So, and this is just a variation that I do on my houses. You wouldn't even need to have this variation on there. You could make the windows all different sizes, but this is just how I like to do mine. Okay, now I'm going to change the tips here. I'm going to put the number 18 star tip back on because I'm going to trim around the windows and door. One thing to remember is as you're changing these tips, make sure that you get them put in water or clean them out right away because that frosting will harden up. Okay, now to go through and trim the windows. To make the star tip, you press down and then squeeze, pressure, and then pull up. And that makes a little star. Okay, so what we want to do to finish off these windows, make them look nice, is we just put stars right in a row, right around the window. And as I squeeze down and pull up, just make them in a row. And here I'm going to finish off this window, going around it. And see, that kind of covers up those edges that are a little bit rough from where we made the window frame. Okay, one thing you need to do is remember to hold that tip right straight up and down, because then you'll get a nice straight tip on your star. Now let's do the door, and we'll just use the same star tip and go right around. Now there are other tips and other variations that you can use. I think this is one of the easiest. There have been times that I've used red or blue frosting, or you could color your frosting any color that you want, depending on how you want it to look. I tend to use white quite a bit just because I think it stands out really well, and it also shows off the holly, which we'll be getting to after we do the trim. My stepson made one of these houses one time, and he put these stars around the window. He did a pretty darn good job. He was 11 years old, and I entered a contest, and he entered a contest. For his age group, he got first place. I think just about any age group could pick this up. Pretty simple. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to pretty much cover up the edge of the Andes mint so that it doesn't show. And with these Andes mints like this, to me it makes the house look like the lights are on. And if you use the dark colored ones that are black on the outside, I think it makes the house look like the lights are off. This also covers up any areas where maybe there was a little bit of frosting that seeped out from underneath the candy as you were gluing it on. And there we have the windows and doors trimmed. Okay, now we're going to make green frosting, and that's going to be the trees, the holly, and if you feel like you want to make ivy on your house, go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do to make this green frosting is I'm going to scoop some of the white out of the frosting that I made, and that looks like about enough. That's probably about a half a cup, or you could maybe make more depending on how many trees you planned on putting in your yard. And I have some green food coloring here. This is the paste food coloring, and it doesn't change the consistency of the frosting, which is pretty darn important, because if you have runny frosting, then it's not going to make a very good holly leaf or a very good tree. And if you're going to make a light green, which I don't recommend, I recommend making a dark green. You could use a toothpick. But what I prefer to use is the end of a spoon, because I use a lot of green. And one thing that I need to caution you about is when you have frosting on here, you cannot put it back in because your food coloring will spoil. So what I need to do is I need to take this and wash it off before I put it back into the food coloring. Right now I'm going to set it aside, and I'll mix this up. I don't think I have enough green in there, but let's go ahead and let's mix this color in and see what we've ended up with. Also, if you don't mix this green in all the way, when you finally get to a green that you think is good, if you'll leave it kind of striped or not completely mixed in, it'll give your holly leaves in your tree kind of a varied colored. And that's what I'm going to do here. So there I've got my green frosting all mixed up, and I'm ready to put it in the pastry bag. Now I'm going to fill my bag with the green frosting. One thing to keep in mind, if you only have one bag, clean out your bag each time. You might want to give yourself a few minutes for it to get good and dried out, or dry the pastry bag out, because it will, with the extra water in there will thin down your icing and make the consistency a little bit thinner than you probably would like. What I've done here is I've put a number 349 leaf tip on, and it's one of the tips that I prefer to use. There are some small tips that you can use that are also leaf tips, and it's your choice. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to scoop up some of this green frosting, and just as I did with the white frosting, go ahead and fill my bag. And I think I can probably take all this green, because it's not too much, and get it in this bag. And then I'll go clean this bowl out, because it's a lot easier to clean it out when this stuff's wet. And then notice how I push the frosting down towards the tip, and then twist it. Then I'm ready to go. Now I'm going to make a holly leaf, and to make a holly leaf, I hold the tip above the door a little bit, squeeze that pressure, let that fan out, pull it down, let it fan out, and then pull it down, let it fan out, and then pull it out. Do the same process. To finish this off, I'll need to make some red food coloring, but we'll do that after all the holly leaves are complete. Before we go ahead and make the red, let's go ahead and use up this green and make a tree for the yard, and we can set it aside. Now we're going to make a tree, and to make a tree we use an upside down ice cream cone. Here's what a finished tree looks like. And it's got some little sparklies, and those sparklies are edible glitter, and you can pick that up at an arts and crafts store. Okay, to get going here, I've switched tips, and I'm using the number 18 star tube. And to make the tree branches, I squeeze the frosting onto that star tube and pull it out, and then let go of pressure. And I go around the tree with that same step. Okay, and I want to go all the way around the base of the tree. And I can also see on this tree where I've mixed my frosting a little darker in some areas and a little lighter in others. And as you can see, some of those branches that I've already pulled out are starting to kind of bend right down with the weight of the frosting, and that'll make it look like a nice fir tree. Okay, now to finish it off on the top here, I'm going to need to set it down, because there's no way I can hold on to it and finish off the top at the same time. And you want to make sure when you set the tree down that you're just setting it in a place that it can sit for about 24 hours. Then you just go ahead and you just finish it right around the top, pulling those branches out. I like to try to get them all so that I make sure they're sticking out in all the different directions. And then I take one and I bring it straight up. And then I take my edible glitter and I sprinkle my tree while it's still wet, so that the edible glitter will stick right into that wet frosting, and it gives it a nice icy look. And I'm also going to use this edible glitter in my yard. There. My tree is done. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the berries. And what I've done is I've mixed up some red frosting and I've put the number 2 round tip onto the bag. I'm going to add 2 berries onto this holly, and I make the berry about the same way that I did the door. Just make a dot and stop the pressure and pull up, just like that. Now for a little bit of decoration here, I've decided to use rock candies and kind of make some rock work on my house. So what I do here is around about half the way down the window, I put frosting. Then I take some rocks and I add them in to the frosting, just for kind of a decoration. This also helps to make the house a little bit sturdy too. This is only one variation that I use on my houses. And I can also use these rock candies for the fence and then also the walkway. Okay, now one thing that I also did was I switched back to the white tube and put the number 18 tip in. And now I'm just kind of going around the rocks and making it look kind of finished there and filling in the areas where there was no frosting. And once I get all my pieces with the rock candies on it, then I'll need to let it sit and dry, and as soon as it's dried, then I'll be ready to put the house up. Now we're going to put the house up. This is the great part because you get to see your pieces begin to come together here. So to do this, what we need to do is we need to figure out about where our house will go. And I think this is my back of my house. So I'm going to give it a little bit of yard space in the back, and it'll have a little more in the front. So first of all, what I'll do here is I'm going to take and make a nice long thick line. Take my house piece and just stick it right in the center of that. And I have some spice bottles here that I think are very helpful, and they just prop that piece right up. Okay, next I'm going to make a line for the side of the house, and I'm also going to bring that line right up the back of the house. And then I take, making sure that the holly is in the right way and the rocks are down on the bottom, put the house pieces together. And boy, it's standing right up there all by itself. We'll prop it up just in case. Okay, now I go ahead and I put the other side piece up, run the frosting back up the other back piece, and position that side in. Okay, then now we're ready for the front of the house, and I just make a line just like I did in the back piece and right up both sides. And I don't skimp on the frosting here at all because I think the more frosting you use, the better your house looks. And then I just go ahead and I put that piece, front piece, right in there. Now, what I've done is I've turned the house around. I've taken away the spice bottles because all the pieces seem to be standing up pretty sturdy. And what I'm going to do to finish off any rough edges here along the side is I pull frosting right up to where the eaves begin on the house. And then to keep the rock candy going all the way around the house, I'll stick a piece of rock candy right in that frosting. Now to put the roof on, you have a couple different options. Here we have the gingerbread pieces that we baked, and we're going to sit them on just like that after we get some frosting along the eaves here. One other option that might be easier for you is to use a cardboard roof. And here I've kind of put one together, to use this roof, you just add the frosting all along all the eaves and sit it down on the house, just like that. And this one you can just go ahead and decorate the whole roof. We're going to use our baked gingerbread house pieces. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to add some frosting here along the eaves and down along the side of the house and on back up. Okay, then I take this roof piece here and I press it right into that frosting. And I need to hold it there for a few minutes because it might come sliding right off. To do the other side, just go about it the same way. Oh, that happens sometimes. That happens because you fill up the bag with more frosting and there gets to be an air bubble in there. That's one thing you need to be real careful about when you're doing the outside decorating. Okay, then we center this one on there. Hold that there for a few minutes and we're done. Now I'm going to decorate the roof, and to do that what I've decided is to decorate it with candy. But first of all, what I'm going to do is use the number 18 star tip and make a nice row of frosting so I can put the candy in it. And I'm just going to line it up here. And I don't skimp on the frosting at all. See how it kind of oozes down? Makes it look like it's a snowdrift. And then just press those candies right in that frosting. And then add more frosting. And then just go right on up to the top of the roof. And see how I've also kind of gotten the yellows away from each other and the greens away from each other. I think it gives it a better look. And now that finishes the roof. Didn't that turn out cute? Now what I do is I go ahead and I make the same kind of a motion that I did as I was putting the roof on, or the candy on the roof, and I'm going right across the top of the house here, just to finish off that top of the roof. And then when I'm done here, I'm going to take my edible glitter and I'm going to sprinkle the top of the house. I like to sprinkle it after each step because that's when the frosting isn't dried yet and this edible glitter will stick to it. There we go. Okay, then next I put the icicles on. And what I do with the icicles is I put some frosting up there and then I pull them right down. And that finishes off that cut edge of the gingerbread too. Now to finish the yard, what I do here is I run a bead of frosting right along the house. And remember where we put that door up? Spaced up a little bit too high? That's why right there, because I put frosting along the edge. Okay. Now for the rest of the yard here, I get frosting from my bowl and I just smooth it into the yard with a spoon, and I don't skimp on this frosting either because I like it to look like it's drifted in the yard. Okay. And this is the most exciting part because this doesn't take hardly any time at all, and this is just about a finished house. Then I have some things here that I plan on putting in the yard. Okay, and one of them is the tree that I made. And I'm going to sit that tree right there. And I kind of just push it into that wet frosting. Okay, then I have a walkway that I want to build right here in front of the doorway. So I just take some of these rock candies that I used along the sides of the house and make a little walkway. Okay, then I have a little figurine here that I want to place into the yard. This little figurine is a little bit larger than I'd like for this house, but I put it away from the door so that it looks like they're walking away from the house. Okay, and then here, I'm going to make a fence with a rockery. And I put a couple rocks down, and then I put a little bit of frosting on the top of the rocks, and then put rocks up on top. And then I think I'll maybe make a little rockery right here too in the front of the house. Okay, then I'm going to put a rock right down here. And another one. And this will be our front yard. Okay, one more thing that I want to add into this front yard is my great edible glitter that I've been using throughout this whole process, and just catches your eye. There we go. And then I'm ready to go ahead and finish off the side. Now to finish off the edges of the styrofoam, I just take my number 18 tip and I just will go up and down the edges of the styrofoam, all the way down to the tape and then up to the yard so that none of that styrofoam shows. Okay, here we are on the home stretch, and I sure wish that you could smell this house because it's absolutely driving me crazy. The sugar smells and the gingerbread smells. I know that your houses will smell just as great as this one does. Oh, finishing blowout there. Okay, there we go. And there it is. As you can see from the back side there, especially, this house is a chalet and decorated with just a couple little boys out front, a tree, and I've made some rock candies in the yard. This house is a church, and you can see how I have the windows cut up to make a stained glass window. It also has ivy growing up along the walls. It has vanilla wafers on the roof. And here in the back you can really see where the ivy's growing and the stained glass window's cut. Has a little sleigh out in front and a little figurine and a Christmas tree. This is a house made with a nickel wafer roof. Has a fence in the front yard with a mailbox, figurines. And as you can see, it has bows on it also. On this house, I've made double doors, and I've also used chocolate Andes mint so that it looks like the lights are off in the house. In the front, there's a boat, and colored a little bit of light blue frosting to make it look like there's a lake. I've also, before I put the windows on, I covered the house with red frosting to make it look like a red house. This is the house that we've just completed, with the rockery all the way around it, and the sun-kissed candies. The figurine out front and the Christmas tree. I've enjoyed showing you how to build gingerbread houses today. And here beside me I have some gingerbread houses that I've put together in different variations. Have a great time with your family and let your imagination go wild.